Quote from A Course in Miracles. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. For a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you, for you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. It's about remembering our origination. I committed this passage to memory many years ago, and I use it as a way to remember who I truly am and where I really came from, particularly when I communicate with my Creator, to stay on purpose and in spirit. Now I'd like to go through each of the messages in this observation from A Course in Miracles one by one. Number 1, the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. We came from a quiet, peaceful place. That's the very essence of creation. So when our mind is filled with noisy dialogue, we shut out the possibility of remembering our spirit. Incessant chatter keeps us attached to the physical world and produces anxiety, stress, fear, worry, and so many of the emotional reactions that are decidedly removed from God realization. We must minimize distractions when we wish to communicate with God. So being in nature, away from the artificial noises that invade our space, is helpful. But the most important thing to consider is how to keep our mind free from the dizzying, bewildering cascade of thoughts flowing through our head from morning till night, and even on into our dream state. It's been estimated that we have something like 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The real problem is that we have the same 60,000 thoughts today that we had yesterday. I've made the practice of meditation a part of my daily life because it's one way to quiet the mind so that the memory of God is accessible. So by learning to meditate, or at the very least shutting down the inner dialogue produced, directed, and acted upon by your ego, you can open up a space for remembering and returning to spirit. 2, it cannot come where there is conflict. In order for conflict to exist, there must be two opposing forces at work. That is, one force, in the form of an idea, a point of view, a desire, or a contribution, directly clashes with another. Conflict defines our lives in many ways, as we oppose our partners, our children, our bosses, our neighbors, and even our countries. In politics, it's always one party versus the other, and the entertainment industry portrays battling points of view that are usually turned into violent scenes. Essentially, conflict requires two-ness. However, remembering where we came from involves our returning to the oneness of being in spirit. After all, there are no battling powers in the divine realm of spirit. There's only perfect oneness, and this is what we want to rejoin. We want to become one again with our Creator, and we can't retrieve this memory of God with a mind in conflict in any way. 3, for a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. The second part of this teaching from A Course in Miracles reinforces that a combative mind cannot remember where it once resided in eternal gentleness. Obviously, you can't wage war and simultaneously focus on peace and gentleness, and it is eternal gentleness that you want to remember and rejoin. It's really quite simple to do this. Just close down the battlefield and surrender. Remove all of the artillery, send the soldiers home, and replace the instruments of war in your mind with thoughts of peace, tranquility, and surrender. Making your mind a place of peace is achieved by your own will, so steadfastly refusing to have thoughts of conflict allows you to activate the glory of remembering your spirit. 4, the fourth part of this quote. What you remember is a part of you. Every memory I have is me. What a glorious feeling it is to know this. We each have the power to retrieve any piece of ourselves that we desire and to experience it right here, right now, in this present moment. The great Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once observed that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. In other words, if we can't go back and remember the spiritual bliss that defined us before the beginning, we've really abandoned a part of ourselves. As we move into communion with God, we must know that our inability to remember our spiritual origins is another way of really saying, quote, I'm unable to know myself because I have no recollection or memory of my spirit. Unquote. In fact, the corollary of this line from A Course in Miracles that we're processing right now would be, what you don't remember is not a part of you. In other words, if we fail to remember spirit, then obviously it isn't a part of us. And 5, for you must be as God created you. As you communicate with your source of being, know that you're awakening a part of yourself that's just like God. In fact, you ought to try to approach communication with God by being as closely aligned to the way that you were created as possible. That is, by becoming a vibrational match to the all-loving Creator. Come to the quiet moments in consultation with God in love, in peace, and without judgment. As A Course in Miracles is saying, you must be as you were created. So why put on a false mask and pretend to be anything or anyone else? In this way, you can open the channel of communication because you finally remembered to be the way you were created. And that's the key to effective prayer. And as Gandhi once said, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it's the most potent instrument of action. And 6, let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God still shining in your quiet mind. Let's take the 3 suggestions in this teaching one at a time. First, A Course says, let this madness be undone. The madness here is that of living in a state of conflict. In other words, we must make an attempt to transcend the dichotomies of our life because the division creates so much suffering and keeps us from living an inspired life. I remember a Ram Dass lecture in which he said, I firmly come to the conclusion that there are no thems for me anymore. I can't be told who to hate, who to fight, who to subdue. I only see an us in my heart. All those messages to divvy up our world are insane. All our self-centeredness just drives our ego's insatiable appetite for making us special and putting other people down. The Course encourages us to be done with this madness once and for all, both in our minds and in our actions. And second, we're told to turn in peace to the remembrance of God. Once again, we know in our heart that we came from a place of peace. So any discord can't be the result of our Creator's actions. God cannot come to us when we pray from non-peace, so the solution is to return to the remembrance of Him and ask to be made an instrument of His peace. When I find myself out of sorts, I remember. And what I remember is to turn to peace right now in prayer. I become peace rather than anguish, and I feel the calmness I long for come over me like a wave of pleasurable relief.
Where there is darkness, light. What is darkness? The absence of purity, the absence of morality, the absence of a higher awareness. And light, whenever it is brought to the presence of darkness, always nullifies the darkness. Light is a faster, higher energy. And whenever you are in a moment of darkness, if you're in your room at night, very often when we're in the dark, we think our most morbid, fearful, shameful, predictable thoughts that things aren't going to work out, that something bad is coming, that I'm afraid that it's going to turn in a way that I don't want it to turn. And you know what to do? Turn on the light. Just turn on the light. Like, get up and turn on a light and watch what happens. That when you bring light to the presence of darkness just in the surroundings, all of a sudden you can see that it's not going to be that way. Suddenly you're saying, or the thoughts that you had in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning when you were so worried and so fearful, and then you get up in the morning and you walk outside and you think, what the hell was I thinking? Why was I so afraid? Why was I predicting a disaster? Why was I thinking that something horrible was coming? Bring light to the presence of darkness. And in bringing light to the presence of darkness, it disappears. It's gone. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. Here's a story that John Marks Templeton tells in his wonderful book, Worldwide Laws of Life. He said there lived an old man who was the personification of difficulty, irritable, messy, fighting with everyone, unwilling to clean up or help in any manner. No one was able to get along with him. Finally, after many frustrating months of trying to stay with the group, the old man left for Paris. Gurdjieff followed him and tried to convince him to return. But it had been too hard, and the man said no. Finally, Gurdjieff offered the man a very big monthly stipend if he would return to the community. How could the man refuse? When the old man returned, everyone was aghast. Upon hearing that he was being paid while they were being charged a fair sum just to be there, the community was up in arms. Gurdjieff called everyone together for a meeting, and after hearing all of their complaints, he laughed and explained, "This old man is like yeast for bread. Without him here, you would never really learn about anger, irritability, patience, and compassion. That is why you pay me and why I hire him with your money." Isn't that great? So when you have sadness, frustration, all of this kind of stuff, you have to figure out a way to love it. And the way that you love it is by bringing joy to it. You have to love your sadness. You have to love and appreciate that this is something that is taking you to a better and a higher place. It's exactly what I did with about my father, and how it was the turning point in my life. How I had taken something that was sad and frustrating and angry producing and so on, how I had taken that and brought joy to it. And when you bring joy, you're bringing one of the very highest frequencies in the universe to the presence of that sadness. And sadness cannot live with joy. Do you know you can't laugh and cry at the same time? That you can't literally be sad and experience joy in the same moment. You have to take one or the other. And joy nullifies sadness. It cancels it. It trumps it, if you will. You have to send love inside and make yourself an orange that is filled with love juice. And that's what you send out. And that's what the great spiritual masters taught us. And we don't always do it. I certainly don't always do it. I do it much more than I used to because I'm better than I used to be. But I'm still not there 100% of the time. When I'm not there, I am conscious of it. And that's a start in not being there as frequently. Make every effort to bring love. And what is love? It says it right in the scriptures. God is love. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him.
We're all on a path, you see. We're all on the same path. We're just on different places along the path. We're all part of this perfection of the universe. And you start seeing the people as being there. And you also begin to see that they have to go through that. I heard an interview with somebody who was a musician not too long ago. And he was a classical musician. And the people that were interviewing him were also expert in this whole area. And they were all putting down rock music, and they were putting down some of the harsher forms of music as being uncivilized or more barbaric. And this one fellow who was very enlightened, he said, when I was 17 or 18 years old, I was a rock musician. And I would play that stuff real loud, and it would drive my family crazy and all of these kind of things. He said, then I moved from that into more sort of contemporary kind of music and ballads and things like that. And I had very little to do with the rock music. Now, he said, I compose classical music, and he plays classical music. And he said that each one of the places that I was at along the path, I needed to be at in order to be here. You can't be looking at somebody else who is not playing the kind of music that you like and judging them as wrong or improper or uncivilized. You have to get judgment out of you completely. And when you understand that judgment is a thought, and that when you judge another person, you don't define them. You define yourself with your judgments. That's a definition of you, putting people into these slots and categories. if you see them not so much as where they should be, or where I would like them to be, but as where they are. And where they are is absolutely necessary. So you see them as here in this music analogy, playing this kind of music that is maybe offensive to people who know classical music or whatever. But you don't judge any of that. You say they have to be there. And if they're going to get someplace else along the line, then they have to do that as well. You begin to see that that makes sense for other people. In other words, if you're going to try to understand others in your life, you have to understand them as wherever they are in the path is where they have to be in order to get to the next place along the path. And you don't judge any of it. You accept it. So that seems very sensible for other people. But it also applies to ourselves, you see, so that everything that we are doing that we know isn't working for us, the constant striving, the constant seeking of approval, the depressions that we may be going through, the relationships that we're in which we're allowing other people to control us, the pursuit of stuff in order for us to have it and all of that, you don't judge yourself along where you are now and say, I shouldn't be doing this. Instead, you get to the point where you see yourself as having to go through this in order to get past it, in order to get to a point where it doesn't matter whether you have these things or don't have them. And then the irony is you'll have all that you need. It'll all come to you in the amounts that is sufficient to take care of your needs. There's no room for judgment any place in an awakened person or in a higher consciousness person. And you'll only see it when you believe it. When you really believe that, and you catch yourself. I do it all the time. I will be talking to my wife, and I'll say, well, not to be judgmental, but... and then I proceed to be judgmental about this thing that I don't like, or that person who did something terrible to another human being in the newspaper. Maybe somebody killed somebody, or somebody stole money from somebody, or embezzled, or whatever it is, and I'll read it, and I'll see that I am being judgmental about it, but I sort of know to announce that I'm not really being judgmental. I'm really sort of above being judgmental, and then I proceed to be judgmental. Well, I don't stop myself and say, I shouldn't be being judgmental right now any longer. What I do is I accept that I have to identify that. I still have some judgmental stuff in me, and as long as I am judging other people, I'm not defining them. I'm defining myself. And then the next time I'm less inclined to do that, and the next time I'm less inclined to do that, until eventually you get to the point where you can see people's behavior for what it is. You don't have to like it, you don't have to love it, you don't have to tell yourself that people have a right to hurt other people or anything like that. What you do is you stop judging it and you see them where they are. And then you do the same thing to yourself. You see yourself where you are. And then you realize that everything that you do, you need to do in order to get to the next step, and the next, and the next. And before long, the stuff that you were obsessed about, that you had to have, you have more of it than you ever had before in your life, and it doesn't matter whether you have it or not. But as long as you have to have it, everything that you have to have owns you. That means you don't own yourself, and you're less and less and less consumed with it. And the irony is that you get more and more and more of it. And if you give more of it away, and you treat it all in a non-judgmental, loving way, that whatever you're getting in, you just keep circulating, and you're not attached to any of it. It just keeps moving and moving and moving, and your whole life changes.
And this power of your imagination, what you place into your imagination, is probably the most important quality that you can have. So that no matter what it is that is taking place, like I've often said, I'm 75 years old now, and never in my life have I ever imagined myself to be poor. Even though I grew up, in a series of foster homes and orphanages, had to work for everything that I've ever had in my life. My mother lived on a very, very tight budget. Just actually literally budgeted every dollar. If she was bringing home $120 a week, every single one of those dollars was accounted for. Part of it went into, she had a little box in there with her little envelopes in it. Part of it went to pay the electric bill. Part of it went to pay, the rent, and part of it went for groceries and all of that. And that's basically how we lived. And when we were all, when I got back with my mom when I was 10 years of age, it was just understood. You go out and you get yourself a paper route, and you contribute and you help out. So, but never, ever in my imagination did ever I place anything there that said this, that things aren't going to work out for me, that I'm not going to be able to have them. And as I look back at my life and wrote my sort of memoir, I can see clearly now. I realized that I always had this space inside of me, like this inner inner place, like a container almost, that was just filled with a belief system that I could create whatever it is that I placed into my imagination and wouldn't let it be taken away regardless of what came down the pike at me. And I find that in these 10 years that we've been doing this show, Diane, that so many of the callers are just so focused on all of the things outside of them that are causing their unhappiness or causing them to not be able to make the money that they would like or whatever, and they don't have people just don't have within them this unlimited imagination that Einstein said it's much more important and significant than what you know, whatever knowledge that you have, because knowledge is just based on the limited number of things that we all know collectively and individually as people. But our imagination is open to everything. I mean, our imagination can take us soaring, out into the universe, beyond this planet, beyond this solar system, beyond this galaxy. It's literally unlimited. And I was having a conversation last night with my son about this. We got to talking. It was about midnight, and we were just sitting up, and I was talking to him about how powerful do you think your imagination is, and what you can place in there, and how long are you willing to allow something to stay in your imagination before you come along with all of the reasons why that was folly, or that isn't going to work out, or that can't happen. To the self-actualized person, they never place anything into their imagination that they do not want to manifest or create. So they're not the kind of people who go around thinking that their luck is going to be bad, or things aren't going to work out, or I'm not going to get a parking place, or I'm going to get a cold, or I'm going to get sick, or whatever. Internally within them, if you have a belief system that you can't get sick, and that you're not going to get a cold, that you're not going to get the flu, and so on, your body literally reacts differently in terms of your immune system and I just feel that if you get your immune system so strong, based upon what you placed into your imagination, if you just build it up by watching what you eat and making sure that you're drinking your juices, and making sure that you're, eating foods that are, they're not loaded with pesticides and so on. And it's like, and you start seeing your imagination as like, Godzilla in there when it comes to any little bacteria or any little virus or anything that's trying to show up and take over and give you a runny nose or give you the flu or give you whatever. You see, what I'm saying, Diane, is that the power of your imagination affects how it is that you relate to the world, and what it is that you allow into your world, and what it is that you expel from your world before it even gets there. And as a result of having that into my imagination, the right kinds of events and people and things begin to show up for you. And, and then you just begin to change your lifestyle based upon nothing more than what you've placed into your imagination. So keep that imagination of yours in such a strong place, and forget about how much you know. And instead, remember that if you want to create anything, a different kind of a life, whatever it is that you'd like to create for yourself, make sure that you have an expectation that you're able to do it, rather than an expectation that says, with my luck it won't work out, or I'm not strong enough.
I'm going to read to you a little excerpt from Neville about this. I will be, in quotes, is a confession that I am not. Okay? I will be is simply a confession that I am not. The Father's will, God's will, is always I am. Until you realize that you are the Father, that you are God, and that there is only one I am, and your infinite self is that I am, your will is always I will be. That's your will. In the law of assumption, your consciousness of being is the Father's will. The mere wish without this consciousness is my will. This great quotation, so little understood, is a perfect statement of the law of assumption. I will be is a confession that I am not. If you change your concept of yourself, the events ahead of you in time are altered. You can alter events ahead of you. Greg Braden wrote about this in The Isaiah Effect. I'd recommend you read that. If you change your concept of yourself, the events ahead of you in time are altered. But thus altered, they form again a deterministic sequence, starting from the moment of this changed concept. You are a being with powers of intervention which enable you, by a change of consciousness, to alter the course of observed events. In fact, to change your future. Deny the evidence of the senses and assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Again, deny the evidence of the senses, everything that your eyes and ears and everything else tells you. Go to your imagination, think from the end, and assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Inasmuch as your assumption is creative and forms an atmosphere, your assumption, if it is to be a noble one, that is, if it's aligned with God, increases your assurance and helps you to reach a higher level of being. This means to make your assumption the highest, noblest, happiest concepts, there is no better time to start than now. The present moment is always the most opportune in which to eliminate all unlovely, I love that, assumptions, and to concentrate only on the good. As well as yourself, claim for others their divine inheritance. You win by assumption what you can never win by force. An assumption is a certain motion of consciousness. This motion, like all motions, exercises an influence on the surrounding substance, causing it to take the shape of, echo, and reflect the assumption. A change of fortune is a new direction, an outlook, merely a change in arrangement of the same mind substance called consciousness. If you would change your life, all of you, you must begin at the very source with your own basic concept of yourself. Outer change, becoming part of organizations, political bodies, religious bodies, is not enough. The cause goes deeper. The essential change must take place in yourself, in your own concept of yourself. You must assume that you are what you want to be and continue therein, for the reality of your assumption has its being in complete independence of objective fact. It doesn't matter what the facts are around you. For the reality of your assumption has its being in complete independence of objective fact, and will clothe itself in flesh if you persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you know that assumptions, if persisted in, harden into facts, then events, which seem to the uninitiated mere accidents, will be understood by you to be the logical and inevitable effects of your assumption. The important thing to bear in mind is that you have infinite free will in choosing your assumptions. That is, your imagination is yours, it's your gift. You can do anything you want with it. The important thing to bear in mind is that you have infinite free will in choosing your assumptions, but absolutely no power to determine conditions and events. You can create nothing, but your assumptions determine what portion of creation you will experience. Isn't that something? Now that's just a little taste of it, and that's the lighter stuff. There are many paragraphs in there that I've read 20, 25 times, like the Tao, when I studied the Tao. Now, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So you have your imagination, you go there, you create what you want for yourself in your imagination, you think from the end, and you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
In all of your waking hours, I encourage you to stay closely aligned to your originating source of being. Practice thinking like God, your highest self, thinks. As I pointed out in a previous book, Excuses Be Gone, when your contemplations are a vibrational match to originating spirit, you are synchronized with divine mind, attracting and fulfilling your desires. You have the same power as originating spirit, as long as you don't replace your divine nature with ego's thoughts, which are essentially the mental meanderings of your false self. While awake, use your mind to repeatedly remind yourself of your true I am that I am nature. Remember that universal one subconscious mind creates in a way known only to itself. It is the great mystery.
Learn to live in that mystery, making every effort to use all of your mental and feeling powers to manifest the life you desire, all the while staying in an uncompromised state of love. Here's what Erich Fromm wrote on this subject of living the mystery. Quote, "Rather than being confronted with an overwhelming proof of the limitations of our understanding, we accuse the dreams of not making sense." Unquote. You needn't be concerned with how it will all work out. All you need know is that you are always connected to your source of being, and that you and God are truly one. Just as no scientist can tell you how a caterpillar knows how to turn itself into a butterfly and then migrate thousands of miles without the benefit of a brain, you must simply accept the great mystery of life and death and stay as closely aligned with this miraculous thing that we call creative source of all being as you possibly can. You don't have to understand it all. All you need to do is remain in a state of love while reprogramming your subconscious mind to develop the habits of a God-realized being rather than an ego-dominated person. As the great Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran observed in his classic book, The Prophet, quote, "Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity," unquote. I urge you to follow the poet's advice and open up that gate and come to know a new external you in your dreams awake, and never forget your own divine magnificence. It is my intention to live in my dreams awake as much as is humanly and spiritually conceivable. I look back upon my dream state and I realize that everything that I needed from my dream I was able to create with my subconscious mind, without effort and with no need for involving my physical body at all. And so I know that manifesting the person I wish to be while awake also involves effortless perfection, and that I have my imagination, or my intentions, my attention, and my feelings to use while awake as well. My sleep time, fully embedded in my subconscious mind, is providing clues for me to put those mental activities into practice when I leave my slumber. I further look back at my dream state from a place of wakefulness, and I see that everything and everyone that was in my dream was created by me with my imagination. I keep this in mind as I gaze at who and what I have created in my awake dream. I look back from my wakeful perspective and realize that I lived in a world where time is an illusion, where nothing is unavailable to me, where cause and effect are total illusions, where all obstacles are turned into either opportunities or revealed as illusions, where there is no beginning and no end, and where my body experiences feelings even though the thoughts that resulted in those feelings are all illusions and were totally devoid of judgments by my dreaming self. And finally, I look back and realize that the only way I know for certain that I was dreaming was to awaken. I remind you here as well that you do have within you these amazing powers of manifestation, and you use them on a regular basis every night and for 1/3 of your entire life in this incarnation. I suggest that while you are awake, you view this 2/3 portions of your life as a dream as well, and realize that the only way you'll know you are dreaming is to awaken. That is, awaken to a new consciousness in which distance and time constraints can be overcome just by a change of state, an awakened state that knows and trusts in the power of your thoughts and feelings to live a wishes-fulfilled life. I am peaceful, I am content, I am love, I am the governing power of the universe, and I attract only to myself those who are in alignment with my highest ideals of myself. This is my nightly ritual, always eschewing any temptation to go over any fear of unpleasantness that my ego might be asking me to review. I assume the feeling in my body of those I am statements already fulfilled, and I enter my sleep inviting the instruction that my subconscious mind welcomes. I know that I'm allowing myself to be programmed while asleep. For the next day, I rise knowing that I am a free agent. I understand that every action and event of the day is essentially predetermined by my feelings as I prepare for sleep, and while I was in that place of warmth and trust in the arms of the one universal subconscious mind.
If this source that we call God or soul or spirit, if it could speak, this is what it would sound like. And then later on, I'm going to talk to you about what it looks like. What does it look like? I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. That's what it sounds like. Everything emanates from me. So that means you. And that's why the words, with God all things are possible, means that when you find in your heart a way to reconnect to this, and remember what I talked about in those opening quotes, that this field of intention is a field that is only corroded because we take on something that separates us from the source. And that is called the ego. And the ego is really nothing more than an idea that we carry around. It's the source of virtually all of our problems. The only difficulty is you can't check into a hospital. Like if you got an appendix problem, you check in, get an appendectomy. There's no place that I know of that gives egoectomies. It would be nice, but it doesn't work that way. So that what you want to do is figure out a way to get rid of this idea that who I am is separate from this. And this is your source. And when you reconnect to your source, live in harmony with your source, you are connecting to the field of intention. And when you're with this field of intention, everything that this field of intention from which all material worlds emanate, everything that it can do, you can do, because you are it and it is you. The problems that we have is we've come to a place where we believe that we are separate from it. And so we start to believe that I am what I do, and I am what I have, and I am separate from everybody else, and I am my reputation, and I'm separate from what is missing in my life. But this field from which all things originate, if it's everywhere, it's got to be in you. And if it's everywhere and it has to be in you, it has to also be in everything that you perceive to be missing from your life. It has to be in that too, because there's no place that it's not. And if there's no place that it's not, you literally are already connected to everything that you would like to attract into your life. What keeps you from doing it is your belief that you're separate from your source. We want to reconnect to this source. People ask me the question, what about a free will? If I was intended here, and the shape of my life was intended here from this source, where does that leave me with a free will? Well, where it leaves you with a free will is this. You have a free will to decide whether or not you are going to connect or not connect to that source. That's your free will. If you make a choice, a conscious choice, to stay disconnected from it and believe that you are all of these things that I just illustrated in the ego, this field of intention doesn't know anything about non-well-being. It creates from a source of well-being. It doesn't know anything about fear, about anxiety, about worry. It just is in a constant state of creating. There's a quotation that goes like this: self-realization, which is really reconnecting to your source. Self-realization means that we have been consciously connected with our source of being. We are reconnected to this source, which I'm going to describe in detail in this program, what I believe the faces of intention look like. Once we have made this connection, then absolutely nothing can go wrong. That's from Swami Paramananda. Nothing can go wrong when you reconnect to source. All of our struggles, all of our illnesses, all of the scarcities in our life, all of the problems we have in our relationships, all of this stuff came about because we disconnected ourselves from a field of intention that is nothing but just well-being at work. It only wants you to be in a state of happiness.
There's something called the seen and the unseen. Consider for a moment the world of form that you see around you, including your body. Who is that invisible I inside all of the tubes and bones and arteries and skin that are your physical form? To know yourself authentically, you must understand that everything that you notice around you was and is caused by something in the world of the unseen. That something is the world of the spirit.
When you look at a giant oak tree, ask yourself what caused that tree to become what it is. It started from a tiny acorn. Your logical, rational mind says that there must be something resembling treeness within that acorn. But when you open the acorn, you find nothing resembling a tree. All you find is a mass of brown stuff. If you further examine the brown stuff, you will discover distinctly acornish molecules, then atoms and electrons, then subatomic particles, until finally you find that there are no particles, only waves of energy that mysteriously come and go. Your conclusion will be that the acorn and the tree itself have a creator that is unseen, immeasurable, and called by those of us who need to classify such things the spirit or soul. This unseen world that is the source of the world of the seen is also the cause of you. In the beginning is energy, energy that has no dimensions, energy that is not in the visible world. This is our original self. It is potentiality, not an object, a future pull, if you will. It is this world of the unseen that I would like you to consider as you listen to these words. Look around you now at the world of form. Then look within and realize that the world began in the unseen dimension. Then make the big leap to the awareness that you are both of these worlds simultaneously. You are not separate from the world of the unseen any more than you could be separate from the world of the seen. You are a combination of both at all moments of your life. The problem that faces most of us in becoming manifestors and learning to manage the circumstances of our lives is that we have forfeited our ability to oscillate between the world of form and that unseen world. Have you been taught that the Creator is something outside yourself? If so, your inner world, the world of the unseen, is full of notions that prohibit you from participating in the creative process. When you overcome these notions, your unseen self will be your ticket to creation in your life. What you want to practice here really is transcending your conditioning. Whether you like it or not, all of us have been conditioned to think and act in ways that have become automatic. We need to figure out how to get past this conditioning if we want to gain access to our highest self. You can be sure the ego will not take well to this kind of an effort. Asking the ego to help diminish its own significance so that you might have access to your higher self is akin to attempting to stand on your own shoulders. Ego is as unable to move aside in deference to spirit as is your eye able to see itself, or the tip of your tongue able to touch the tip of your tongue. Your task thus becomes a quagmire of paradoxes. If you rely upon your ego to get past the influences of the ego, it will only strengthen its hold on you. You must figure out how to emancipate consciousness from the limitations of your mind and your body. In the ego state, you generally experience yourself as a separate entity. To move past this conditioning, you want to begin to see yourself as humanity rather than as a separate form in a body. Very simply put, if you feel that you are disconnected from the rest of humanity and truly a separate entity needing to prove yourself and compete with others, you will be unable to manifest your heart's desire. If you are able to see yourself as a part of what you desire, you will have transcended the conditioning of your ego and of all the other egos who have contributed to this process in your life. Here are a few of the conditioned thoughts that keep your ego in charge of your life and prevent you from materializing what you desire and what desires you. The first is called, I am not in charge of my life. That force is outside me. You can change this perception. Turn your attention away from the ego-dominated thoughts about the circumstances of your life to the present moment. By consciously noticing your breath, the sounds, textures, smells, and scenes that the life force is experiencing through you. A second conditioned thought says, people cannot manifest. It is all a function of the cosmic throw of the dice. It's all just luck. Well, blaming luck or some external invisible force that controls the universe is a habit of conditioning that leads to disempowerment and ultimately to defeat. You are the universe. It is not something outside you. You are that force which is in everything, even the things that have previously failed to show up in your life. Remember, as you think, so shall you be. If you think you can't, you're right, and that is precisely what you will see showing up in your life. A third conditioned response, or thought. I have tried before and it's never worked for me. Here the conditioned response is believing that once having tried and failed, further efforts will yield the same results. Let go of your obsession with the past and with trying, and instead remain relaxed and casual in the moment. Your past is an illusion. It is the trail that is left behind you,
and a trail behind you cannot drive you today, regardless of what you choose to believe. All you have is now, and you have never tried anything. A fourth conditioned thought: only highly evolved beings can manifest. Here again, this is the ego saying that you are separate and distinct from your spiritual teachers and others who live at the highest levels. Relinquish those thoughts and replace them with seeing yourself as connected to everyone by that unseen life force that is your divine essence.
It is time to let go of beliefs that have served you well, but now keep you from moving along your sacred path. The process of letting go is easily understood if you can picture life as giving exams. Just as we are required to pass exams throughout our school experience, so too are we required to pass exams in the larger school called life. If we pass them, we move on to the next level, and then take the exam for that level throughout our stay in now here. If we don't pass, we repeat the course and continue at that level until we get the lesson. Many years, even an entire lifetime, might be consumed repeating a lesson in order to pass a spiritual examination. We might find ourselves repeating the same behaviors tirelessly and depressingly, over and over, without getting the lesson that life is trying to teach us. You may find yourself going from one bad relationship to another, even seeking the same person each time, only in a different body. Repeatedly, you might find yourself being dominated, unappreciated, or taken for granted by an inconsiderate partner. Perhaps you continue in an occupation repeating the behaviors of previously unsatisfying job experiences. You could continually latch onto the same kinds of germs and repeat debilitating disease patterns. People who successfully put themselves onto the spiritual path are living the life they love and feeling productive because they realize that life patterns are trying to tell them something. They understand that those situations are the exams. The same responses, the same answers that they've always been given previously, will not get different results. The decision is made to pass this exam in this area at this time by responding differently. To move on to the next level in this curriculum called life, you have to pass the exams along the way. Having a personal history keeps us from now. This is a radical idea, perhaps, but I am asking you to consider the possibility of totally eradicating your personal history from your consciousness and simply living completely in the present moment. The first thing that might pop into your mind, as it did into mine when I began to consider this possibility, is that it is impossible. I do have a memory, and it would be folly for me to pretend that I am not the product of my past. What I'm asking you to develop is a forgettery to go along with your memory. The point is that as a result of being a product of your past, you are dancing to a tune thrown at you by others. In order to take the steps upward towards your sacred quest, you must toss out the idea that you are unable to take those steps in the first place. Let go of all the beliefs that convince you of your inadequacies and shortcomings. Clean out that closet of worn-out loyalties to what you can and cannot do. Just open yourself up right in this moment. Be like a clear, blank slate. Nothing is imprinted or projected onto this slate. It begins with no. It ends with now. There is no guilt about erasing your personal history. There is great love and respect for all that you have learned up until now, but now is blank and, most important, open to all possibilities. No restrictions, no limitations, only the willingness to experience God and the entire divinity of the universe within yourself. Your life is no longer to be constrained by what you've known as your personal history. Your individual soap opera has received its cancellation notice. In the instant that you drop that personal history, you become eternal. You always have been, you always will be. Finally, you are working on answering the question, who am I? Your answers no longer need be confined to the labels that defined your body and your life experience. Your personal history has attempted to convince you that you are one or several of the labels that you have been assigned. Ultimately, you adopted the labels as who and what you were. In the process of erasing your personal history, you need to remove all the artificial labels. Here are some of the things that you are not. You are not your name. The label that is your name originated in antiquity, usually based on the work of your ancestors. Your name was given to you to help distinguish your body from the other bodies around you, and to give others a word to use when they want to refer to you. But don't for a moment think that this is who you are. Indeed, it is who you are not. You are not your body. Notice how the previous sentence uses the phrase, your body. This implies that the body is something that you possess.
You are the possessor of the body and the invisible force behind the body, but not the body itself. The body is nothing more than a conglomeration of raw material, including bones and gristle and blood and iron and calcium and skin. As you consult your personal history, you will find lots of trauma about the body's importance. Were you taught that your appearance said a lot about you? Most of us were taught to spend hours before mirrors worrying about posture, physique, skin, absence or presence of hair, weight, height, and on and on. But this is your false self at work. You own the body. You are not the body. You are not your mind. Just as we say your body, we also say your mind. This implies the owner of the mind. You think thoughts with your mind. Therefore, these are the thoughts, and there is the thinker of the thoughts. For most of your life, you've been taught that you are your mind. You've been training your intellect, attending classes ad infinitum, and identifying yourself somehow with what you know. As you leave your personal history behind, you will leave behind the notion that you are your mind. You are not your occupation. You are not engineer, nor teacher, nor secretary, nor shopkeeper. These are choices that the invisible divine you has made as your way of fulfilling your heroic mission while visiting the now here. The more your position becomes defined as who you are, the more difficult it is for you to know truth and freedom. The role identification itself can keep you away from your own true higher self, since the role of occupation is the dominant force in your life. Dropping your personal history involves shedding the notion that you are what you do. Remember this exercise in logic. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. Make every effort to remove these labels from yourself and know that you are not what you do, nor are you the doer. You are the one who watches the you who is doing. You are not your relationships. Certainly the love energy between you and all of those in your immediate circle is very significant, but it is not who you are. You are not your country, your race, or your religion. Discard these names, and you will identify with the realm of the spirit rather than the world of the ego. Then you are no longer willing to fight the fights of your ancestors who have tried to convince you whom to hate and whom to love. You will no longer participate in the tribal consciousness in which you perceive yourself to be better than another by virtue of your birthplace or skin color. Your personal history has trained you in the ways of your tribe. These are limitations that you do not need to have. Let go of that identification with the labels and choose a new perspective of unity consciousness. You are united with all souls. Their packaging or location is simply irrelevant.